Hey, Ed Pevos back here at Motor City Comic Con. It hasn't even opened yet. And look who I ran into getting coffee.
Oh my gosh.
Sean Astin.
Oh no.
I know, right? Lord of the Rings, Toy Soldiers, one of my favorites.
Classic. Deeper in the catalog. I like it.
Oh man, that's a good one. And by the way, so you're kind of reuniting with Will Wheaton.
Is Will here this weekend? I didn't know who's here.
Yes, Will is here. You're like right next to him. Your booth is right next to him.
Oh, that's good.
I mean, how often do you kind of talk to Will? Often do you see him, or how rare is like a
Will and I actually,
reunion?
we're actually kind of like in semi-regular contact with each other. You know, we've actually, in the last couple of years, we've bonded a little bit and we've traveled a little bit and like, yeah, so I'm thrilled to know. I didn't look at the guest list. Usually I look at the guest list, so that's fantastic.
Well, I'm glad I broke the news to you.
Yeah.
Like, how often have you been able to get to Michigan or Detroit, or is this your first time?
I've been to Michigan a lot.
A lot. That's good.
I've been to Michigan a lot. I was actually in Novi in 2008 making a movie, the world famous Demoted. Well, you never heard of that?
Gotta look that one up.
Come on. It's kind of a raunchy movie, but it was right as the economic kind of crisis hit. So it was amazing to be in Novi with all these great like office complexes, these big glass buildings and stuff, and they were all empty. But then there's a lot of political work. I've given speeches like up in the UP. What? Who knows about the UP? You know what that is?
You crossed the mighty Mac?
I did.
I never even crossed the bridge in 20 years. It's great.
And my wife was from northern Indiana, so we could drive over the border. So don't front with me about Michigan, fool. I know Michigan.
And you're a runner.
8 trillion lakes or whatever.
You're a runner. Tell people about that, because
there's a
it's
Detroit
big part
City.
of your life.
There's a Detroit City Marathon. Sorry, that I'm dying to do. I did the Windsor Comic Con last year, or the year before, last year I think, and it was the same weekend as the Motor City. I think it's called Motor City Marathon. And I was like, I was pretty in good shape at that moment, and I was like, oh, I gotta jump in it.
I think it was the Detroit Free Press Marathon is what it's called, but it's the same thing.
Their medal was awesome. It looks like this car and stuff, but they're like, well, getting across the border, it might take you a little bit longer, and I had to be able to get right into the convention, so I couldn't do it. But I want to come back and do that.
We would love to have you running through the streets of Detroit in a marathon.
Detroit City!
Hey, there's Sean. Last question.
There's usually like 20,000 people, so you'd be like, I don't know.
You would get lost in the crowd, but
Yeah,
you never
that's
know.
part of
Somebody
what's
might be like, hey, wait a minute. The guy from Lord of the Rings is running by me, I think.
Usually people are passing me, and so they're like, oh, yeah, the Goonies guy, how you doing? They keep going.
Running by the guy from the Goonies. What do people like to ask you about the most? Because you have so much. Rudy, Goonies, even 24. I mean, like, what do people, like
the Midwest, Rudy is one of the more popular ones, sports movie. Everybody wants to know what it was like working on Lord of the Rings. That's maybe the most frequent question I get asked is, what was it like doing that movie? Because it's just such a spectacle and such a journey for people just to watch it, that they want to know what it's like to make. They want to almost relive the movie experience by hearing what the filmmaking experience was. So that, most people, not most people, a lot of people come up and they've got tattoos of Goonies, of the skeleton of One-Eyed Willie, or of Chunk, or the pirate ship, or me. That's always weird to see your own face tattooed on somebody's chest. You're like, wow, I feel so close to you now.
Do you think there should ever be a remake or like a reboot of Goonies, or just leave it alone?
No, there should definitely be a reboot. I used to really want a sequel, a proper sequel, and at this point, I don't know if that's I don't know if that makes as much sense now. But if they rebooted it and gave the original Goonies a little cameo or something like that, I would think that would be cool. And it will happen. Steven Spielberg just has to say yes. Or, I don't know, how old is he? At some point in a few decades, when he's finished his journey on Earth, then Warner Brothers will absolutely, immediately go into production on the...
It'd be cool. I don't think a lot of people will complain if there's another Goonies. There's always the haters that say, all right, you're going to reboot it and ruin it, but...
I learned from Kurt Vonnegut.
So.
Kurt Vonnegut, we did an adaptation of one of his short stories from the Welcome to the Monkey House book, which is a collection of Vonnegut short stories, and it was like a 7 or 8 or 11 page little thing. We turned it into a whole movie, and the movie was absolutely nothing like the book, from the story of the book. Just the premise of sort of a treatise on socialism, and the thing that he said when we were promoting the movie, when people were like, what do you think about this sort of crime against literature? He said, no one's ever going to take away my thing. My story is my story. I wrote it. I know what it feels like. I know that people read it and how it feels to them. He goes, I watched this movie. It's a good movie. He said, I enjoyed watching it. He said, it's not my show. It's different. So nobody can ever take away the experience of any of these sort of 80s cult classics or whatever, or so, you know, cultural phenomenon. So Goonies, nobody can ever take Goonies away from everybody. And maybe the reboot sucks and maybe it's great, but like, why not? People love it so much. You know, you mentioned Toy Soldiers. Toy Soldiers would be incrable reboot. I mean, in the terrorism
what
age,
they could do today in the terrorism age. Yeah,
like incredible.
Exactly.
So artists are about creating. You know, I was at this gathering the other night and they had a live painter. And he had, was it Dre? He had like somebody's picture, like 8x10 picture, and he had this huge canvas, and he turned on this music, and you know, halfway into it, 25 minutes into it, he's just sweating, and like he couldn't get into it first, but by the end of it, he created a portrait that I'm sure was worth $10,000. It was like, oh my God, I would have that in my living room. It's so, it was Drake. Even if you're not into Drake, like, the way he captured his essence, but he did it in 2 hours. And at the end of it, he was going to move his brush, and it came out of his hand, and it put this green splotch on it, and you were like, no, he messed it up. But it's like he just keeps going. So I think the fact that people defend what they love is really good. I just think it's a good idea for people to open their heart to and be brave as a viewer. You have to have a little bit of fearlessness. If you want fearlessness in your filmmakers and your actors, you know, and your writers, if you want them to do stuff that you've never expected before, you've got to be willing to let them fail. So that's my thing.
There you go. All right, Sean Astin. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I wanted to ask you about Stranger Things too.
Yeah.
Oh,
second season.
That was the first question I was going to ask, and I totally forgot. Can you just real quick just tell people maybe anything, a little bit about your character or anything like that, real quick?
The only thing that I'm at liberty to say.
I know you're not allowed to say.
I know, and they're and you know what? Netflix said it to us great at the table read. You know, it's such a hit show that, and to come in into the second season, and you know, you sort of hope you don't screw it up. But big table, huge cast, and lots of executives, and lots of crew and people listening, and they just said, you know what? The reason we keep the secret is you want to protect the fan experience. You want to protect the audience's experience of the show. So it's not like just a business consideration where you're like, oh, we don't want to like, let people see it so they'll pay. You know what I mean? It's like, no, we want the audience to love it. So what I can tell you about my character, his name is Bob Newby, and he is a manager at Radio Shack. And he is
totally 80s right there.
Totally 80s. Oh my gosh, it was so fun, like looking at all the stuff in the radio shack. But Winona Ryder, we went to high school together, our characters, and Joyce Byers' character and Bob went to high school together. With the sheriff too, with David Harbour's character,
cool.
And Jim, and so there's a little bit of a romantic thing.
Okay.
Not with being the sheriff. I mean.
Well, Winona Ryder's character, maybe. Okay. Well, look for him in Stranger Things too. That's awesome. Sean Astin. Look for him here at Motor City Comic Con all weekend. Thank you very much, Sean Astin, Ed Pevos for MLive.